Hello, everyone. So today I want to talk about something that's very important to me and something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. So I'm Mag. I'm one of the co-founders of Skip. Uh, but today's talk is about user accountable applications and why it's so important to build applications that are accountable to users and sort of the telling the story about like how people fit into what we're building, like whether it's in Cosmos or whether it's in something else, and thinking about like how does the Cosmos stack and the existing Cosmos vision fit this today, or does it live up to it today? Interesting. Okay, I'm just going to scroll. So, two questions that I have, sort of for everyone, and I think everyone should answer what when they're building is the first question is who are you building for? Like, who are the humans underneath everything? What are their lives? What are their names potentially? Oh, you don't have to figure out their names if it's in crypto. Um, but who are you building for? Who are the people at the end of the day? I think this is super important because a lot of people don't really know who they're building for. They're just sort of building and like they have this nebulous concept of a community, and they don't actually know those humans behind it. And the second question is like, what is an application, right? Like we talk about, oh, we want more apps. Like what is an application? Is ETH an application? Um, is obviously like Uniswap is usually considered like the quintessential example of an application, but like what is the actual definition of that? And then once you have the answers to those two questions, who are you building for, what is an application, like what do you do with that? So I think things will make more sense in a second. So the answer to, in my opinion, to the application question is an application is just something that creates value for a community. So Ethereum, in my opinion, is an application. There's a community behind that. Uniswap has a community as well. Bad Kids is an application. It creates value for a community. Chainlink, all of these things that we consider be successful, ultimately behind them is a very strong community of humans that believe in something, right? And then my argument is that your community are your users, right? That is who you're building for. And I think one important thing to think about is, like why is this such an important realization, or like why is community such an important part of what you're building? And in modern psychological theory, the underlying three core needs of sort of like physiological desire is one, a sense of autonomy, two, a sense of competence, and three, a feeling of belonging, right? Um, this a lot of this research came out of like the study of cults, like why really smart people join cults, and a lot of it is on number three, right? Which is like there's this feeling of like, okay, I belong here, right? And so many people, I think, especially in today's world, are like out and are having trouble finding a community, and then being able to join something and believe in something is such like a human need. So even if your, application is something like Chainlink, it's like, I don't know, do you believe in oracles? Like at least what they have created is like a sense of belonging. And I think like this is really where software has failed in the traditional world, right? Or in Web 2. Like I just took a couple screenshots here. Censorship on Reddit has gotten out of hand. eBay cares little for its sellers. Amazon reviews are universally fraudulent. Congress literally doesn't care what you think. Like most of the things outside or like in our traditional world have become unaccountable to their community. They don't listen, right? They don't really feel like they're owned by the users and the community that use them. And even the major institutions that were designed to create community, this is a study from the Wall Street Journal, like if you look at patriotism, religion, having children, community involvement, these things that were like the bedrocks of community, these have gone way, way down. Like the things that people found belonging in don't really do that for them anymore. It's funny to me, like the only thing that's gone up is like a sense of what's really important to people is money. Um, And so like the world is killing community over time. Maybe this trend reverses. I don't think it will. But like crypto is the place for community applications. There it's a place for building things, even if it feels cheesy, where you can actually create this sense of shared community. And it's such a human need. So my argument is that the solution to everything I've chatted about is building these user accountable applications. So it's not just recognizing you have a community, but also building your application in a way that's accountable to those community members. So let's talk about like applications today in crypto. So one of the things that I think about a lot is like if you have just a general Cosmos chain or pretty much any crypto application, there's no identity of the user, meaning you can look at accounts, you can look at sort of like general activity, but there's no like user identity, meaning there's no way to identify a specific person in the community. And I'm not talking about like KYCing that user, right? Or like figuring out their social security number or their full name. But there's no way of like identifying individuals that you can then be accountable to. Um, and so what I think we've done in crypto is we've rested on the groups that we can identify, right? So like we can identify LPs, we can identify validators, or we can identify token holders because they're cryptographically verifiable. We can see what their actions are, and we can identify them as a unique position, right? And so we've assigned all the governance and accountability to those people, right? To validators, to token holders. We've given them the governance power, but they're not necessarily the users. So, like, what if you believe in sovereignty, right, and you believe that your application has is sovereign, sovereignty necessarily means that you're sovereign over a people, like a group of humans. And so the question is like, what does it mean then to be citizen to your application, right? Like, what is the concept of citizenship? And as I said before, you don't need KYC to do that. I'm going to argue that there's like other ways of identifying these users and being accountable to them. So as I was saying before, like governance today, right? Token holder governance is um, is not really community driven, right? So unless your app is just a token, unless your use case is the token, your token holders are not your users, right? Your validators are not necessarily your users. I'm not saying that like some validators will not use your application, but fundamentally the validators of Osmosis are not the users of Osmosis as a group. And therefore your community and the same thing with token holders and your community are not your token holders, right? And so why, in this case, are you giving governance to your token holders? It doesn't necessarily make sense. And I think it's been like the cause of a lot of like community or governance bloat within Cosmos specifically, but then also, almost all governance systems. And I think there hasn't been like enough innovation on this front. So how do we get to like user accountability? Step one, just identify your users, like figure out who they are. I mean, there's so many ways to do this. You could go into your Discord and be like, try to figure out who are the individuals that are like actually using your application and driving a lot of your volume or whatever you consider to be usage. To give them the power to change things. Like they're the small group of people that actually like using your application. It doesn't matter if there's, you may have 400,000 people in your Discord. If there's only, 20 traders or there's only 50 really active traders, that's your community. Like those are the people who care about what you're doing. And those are the people who will reward you and will actually advocate for you. And whether it's a token or whether it's an application, believe in you and will move things forward. And then three is like streamlining the governance process for those people, right? Obviously, like making people vote on every decision, like whether I should, update this small parameter or not, that's probably too much. And I would be very interested to see, like, can we change things so that we can like experiment with more governance systems, right? Like we in the United States, I'm not saying it's a good governance system, but like we have to elect officials, right? That's like the pretty standard way I think of streamlining governance today. We don't have to vote on like every little thing. And so I'd be very curious to see like what process that could look like. And I don't think those officials by default should be validators. I feel like there should be a better process around this of like electing people with high reputation who are ideally users themselves. And then the other thing that I think is like very important is like I see a lot of things get launched and then I talk to the founders and like they don't fundamentally believe in their product. Like, I don't know, I was chatting to like the founder of a Ethereum L2 that's very, very successful. And he didn't have an emotional connection to like why he's doing what he's doing, right? And so like in reality, he's not really part of the community, right? Like if you're someone just creating a community, you need to be, and you want to be the leader of that, like you have to be the biggest believer in what you're doing. And like you have to be, I think, in the position where you're like, even if I wasn't the leader, I would still be part of this because I this matters to me so much. Not to shill something else, but like I feel this way very much with like Penumbra, right? Like their entire team like really believes in what they're doing. And like even if they weren't going to make any money from it, like I get the sense that like they would still want to use like what they're building, right? And so I think this is like an essential quality. And I think this is what you get um, from the natural leaders of really good communities. This is all to say, like as a founder of a protocol, after doing a lot of research on the successful protocols, like you need to give people something to believe in, right? Um, it doesn't matter if like all you're trying to do is like build an application that's slightly different than something else. Like at the core, it doesn't matter if you're Chainlink where like your product is literally something that's not that exciting to like humans and doesn't have a lot of emotional value. You can create this, right? You can, and I think the way that you do it is you find the people who really believe and you invest in them and you give them power. So I want to talk about like step one, right? So shared user identity. This is kind of how things work today, right? So you have like users going directly to applications and applications sort of like directly interact with like their conception of users. But there's like a very nebulous line, right? Like I often see like user studies of like osmosis, for example, where like they talk about, oh, we think we have this many users, but there's no real way of identifying them. And like there's like a big sort of like fog when you think about your user base. Like there's sort of just a group and like you don't really know what they're doing. There's no way of identifying them. So getting to shared user identity is that there's one identity for a user and it's shared across applications, right? Like there's one concept of a user and it relates to one human, right? So like imagine you have like a dashboard that's just like your dashboard and you're you, and then applications can communicate to you through that. So you know there's like a application A and application B will understand if they are interacting with the same user. I think this is really important because this is also a big way that we solve UX in like multi-chain application world. So I think this next slide. So like, yeah, one of the things that we did at Skip is we try to make this the case, right? Like this is an example of like a shared identity application, right? Where you're just a user and it gives you access to a bunch of things, right? Like you no longer have to go to Initia to interact with Initia, or no longer have to go to Atom to interact with Atom, or go to the Osmosis page to interact with Osmosis. It's just one place where you can do a lot of things, right? Because like you're one person and you want to use a lot of things. Just an example. But there's a lot, there's so much further to go, in my opinion. So, we could have shared reputation identity between chains. Like imagine you're like a new chain and you want to get access to the information of like who are the good users of this other application, right? Like let's say you're, a new perpetuals dex and you want to get access to like who are the top traders or the top users of like DYDX. Like you should be able to like contact those users, right? And this could be possible if there was an idea of shared reputation. Simplified core functions around yield, leverage, payments. So like there's these fundamental things that users want, I think, in crypto, especially around like DeFi, that you could just like make very basic in a shared platform. Um, reputational governance, like let's say you're starting a new governance system and like you want to elect a leader, why not like offer the position to like a very reputable leader of a different governance system, right? Um, shared standards. So basically like, for very basic things like staking or transferring or swapping or, some of the other things I talked about in the top right, you could have that just like very easily abstracted across multiple chains in one place. And then like I think one thing that would be really cool is like better airdrops, right? So one of the biggest things I see right now is people just like airdrop their tokens in terrible ways. They like airdrop them based off of like, like if you airdrop your token to someone who doesn't even really know about you, or like maybe they just qualified because they committed something to like a far off repo, there's almost no way that they're going to join your community and care. And so you could much better craft your airdrop strategy around like, okay, who are these other people who really care about something similar because I know what their identity is, and like how can I get my token to them so they hopefully care about my thing. So like what would it look like to have user governance? I think it's the answer of like you should govern what you use, right? Like if you need governance for liquidity parameters, right? So like for example, what is your like tick size, or what is your IMF if you're a perp stacks? Like that could be governed by your LPs, right? These are the people who actually like potentially use this and like it matters to them, and they're the ones that you need to incentivize to actually put money in. If you're a perp stacks, uh, who are your users? They're traders, right? They're people who are like actually trading. It doesn't really make sense that like validators would govern that or like be forced to govern that. Um, and like probably also if you're perp stacks, you want like market makers to have a say in things. And then if you're like an infra company or you're building infra, your builders are your users, right? Like they're the ones that should be able to sort of like guide what you're doing. And then I have this last point sort of as a joke, like VCs govern nothing, right? Or they don't use anything. And so like they shouldn't govern anything, which I think is like a big change from today. Like oftentimes VCs are some of the biggest token holders, and so they have huge governance power. But the chances that they're actually actively using that thing and being part of the community in addition to their like 50 other portcos is like zero, right? Um, so they shouldn't really be part of the community. I have a couple more slides here. One thing I think that is important is like recognizing multi-community, right? So, when you're building a community and you're trying to build your user base in your community, uh, you're sort of in the center of a lot of overlapping communities, right? Like, for example, if we're just talking about tokens and people holding your token, they're probably holding a variety of other things as well. And they're sort of part of a bunch of different things, right? I think this is like a core realization because a lot of people when they're building community, or a lot of applications they're building community, they think they're like the only thing that exists to their user base is them. It's not the case usually, right? There's like a lot of things that people care about. um, Cardano is usually fully on a separate island, but they actually do a really good job of creating community. If I have one thing to say, it's like study Cardano. They have a great way of like finding new people in crypto. And so I think like if you recognize this, your natural thought is, okay, well, if my user base is actually part of a lot of other things as well, how do I embrace that, right? Like if I really care about that user, how do I embrace the fact that they're part of a lot of different things? Um, so like build for that, right? Like build for the reality that users are in many different places at once. And so I think there's a couple of things that are like really interesting to explore that we just fully haven't explored yet. Like what about shared liquidity, right? If your user base also happens to be like really excited about another product or like another community, how can you like share liquidity with that other product in a way that makes it much simpler for them to move between them, right? Or like shared UX. How could I like ally with this other thing so that I could bring our products together so it's just better for our shared community together, right? Shared collateral, like how could collateral on my chain be relevant for the other chain or my app and the other app, vice versa. Gas fees, how if you're a user on that application, can you get a discount on my application? Like this is, I think, what it looks like if you can find shared communities with two places and really embrace that in like a crypto way, right? So my last two slides, community is power. Like I've seen this I've been in crypto since 2016. I've seen this like so many times. Like every good thing and every good token with like a consistent token price is backed by a strong community that like fucking believes in it. um this is the power, right? Like this is the power of like crypto applications. And it's often it's not really like, is my crypto app usable, is it slightly better than something else? It's like, no, do you have the community, right? Do you have the group of people who are ride or die behind it? And so, as I said, like community is your token price, right? Like um I have seen many different, like, I'm a big study of token price. I think everybody is probably at the end of the day, but we don't have a token, and so it's made me very like interested in like seeing which tokens do well and which haven't. I've seen many rise and fall, and like ultimately the ones that succeed have this group at the core that are like, no, this matters. We're holding, or we're like going to continue evangelizing this, and building it is such a huge piece of being successful. And like, despite having no Twitter presence, no like, they're not here like in this room or even at this conference really. Like Cardano has succeeded, right? Massively so. And the main reason for that is like they have built an intense like community, and they've like done the outreach, and they've built the narrative for their community and like empowered them. And so who are you, right? Like if you're building something, and you're building an organization, an application, if you're building anything new, right? You represent your people, right? Like you're already assigning yourself the position of community leader. And uh, that means like you're putting yourself as a leader of a group, right? So one, you better believe it, and you better be a good leader. And then two, the first thing to identify is like, who are you leading, right? If you're going to be a leader, who are you leading? It's not necessarily your team. It's like obviously your team is part of it, but there's some group of people there. So challenge is finding out who those people are and leading them correctly, I think. You're also awesome. Thanks for coming. I know it's early. Hopefully this was interesting, but thank you.